Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. We are excited. Well, I'm excited because next week is Valentine's Day. So, in honor of Valentine's Day, we're going to talk all things relationship, and people love it when we talk about love and marriage and all the things. And so, I'm excited to get into that with you guys and talk about your nervous system and how it is preventing you from having a happy marriage. Now, not for everybody, but I think a lot of us don't realize how it's impacting us, and not only for married people, but even singles. So, I'm going to start off with how the nervous system impacts our decision making as singles and why some of us may still be single, and then go into communication as well as just overall intimacy and how that's impacted in your marriage based on how well you're taking care of your soul and of your overall nervous system. So I think that this is going to be really, really good because we've been on this kick. So, how many of you guys joined us last week when we were praying and during our Jumpstart Incubator? What are some takeaways that you got from that teaching? That you really, really loved or was really, really impactful. God really spoke to us, had several clear breakthrough moments for a lot of people. So I would love to see what you learned from the fast, if you were joining us praying every single morning, or if you were part of the Jumpstart Incubator. What were some takeaways for you as we give everybody just a second before we go into our content today? I know that what every time I talk about love and marriage, I always think of that song. It's old. It's from that show, Love and Marriage. Now I never used to watch it because my mom would not let us watch it, right? So I think it was a little raunchy, but that's what we're going to be talking about: love and marriage, and how to stay married, how to get married. And then next week, we have a free webinar going on for everybody, whoever would like to join on marriage and intimacy. So I'm going to go right into it. Stuff that I can't say on this live, I will be talking about in that webinar. We're going to be talking about sex and just how to build a great sex life for the married couples. As always, the singles, because I know they're going to ask, can we be in there? Can we be whatever? You could be a fly on the wall, high up, but I will be doing some specific single trainings in a little bit. So in March and April, the webinars will be targeted towards the singles. So I haven't forgotten about you. But today, this is for everybody. So let's talk about 10 reasons why your nervous system may be blocking a healthy marriage and impacting your communication and intimacy in your marriage if you're already married. So, reason number one, you're living in survival mode. We've already established this. If you're just finding us today, we've been talking about the nervous system and how it's connected to us being whole emotionally and spiritually, and how to come out of survival mode so that we can become who God has called us to become. And so, for the next 2 weeks, we're going to be talking about marriage, relationships, all the things. And one of the things that hinders people from getting married, but also having a thriving marriage, is living in survival mode. When your nervous system is stuck in fight, flight, or freeze, your body prioritizes safety, not connection. So, what does this look like for a single person? You may have people approaching you, but because you're afraid that they're going to hurt you, you're afraid that it's not going to work out, you're afraid that they're not good for you, you constantly fly away, fight, or you constantly flight, right? And so what that looks like is you sabotage great opportunities. You don't, anytime you try to go deep, you figure a reason to pull yourself out of that deep connection. In marriage, you may have gotten married, but you're not able to be open in the marriage bed. You're not able to be fully intimate because you don't know if you're going to be safe. Conversations feel threatening. So every time someone, your spouse or even your boyfriend or girlfriend says, hey, we need to talk about something, you freeze up right? You are not collaborative. You are, I'm going to do this on my own. I'm going to figure it out on my own. You don't talk about what's on your heart because you feel like life is a threat to you and you feel unsafe. So when it comes to marriage, intimacy feels unsafe rather than a bonding experience. So if you've been married and you are in, going through the rhythm and going through the routine, and it just feels like something you have to do, but you're not deeply connected to your spouse, could it be that you are in survival mode and you're just doing it because you have to do it? And there's something that has gone on that has dysregulated you, that is making it very difficult for you to connect intimately. And those are some of the things we'll hit more in detail in the webinar next week. It's called His Needs and Her Needs. As we go into that. And so for those that are not married, what I see is that you end up even not even getting deep, not even going further. You come up with all kinds of excuses, and some of them sound very spiritual, but you could be in survival mode. Another thing that's happening is that your body's interpreting conflict as danger. So if you are single and you don't know how to manage conflict well, you don't know how to talk through things. Every time there's an issue, you'd rather just bury it. You don't want to bring it to the surface. It's going to be really difficult for you to have a healthy relationship and even be able to help build a healthy courtship. Because in courtship, I tell people you need to fight at least 4 or 5 times. You got to figure out how you fight, how you make up, how you work through hardships and all of that. It's not a cute thing when people are like, oh, we ain't even fought yet. No, no, no. You're not ready for marriage if you haven't had a discussion. But when we're in flight and fight mode, we avoid conflict. And so maybe you weren't in fight and flight mode before you got married, but something has happened in marriage. And now when your spouse says, hey, I want to talk about this, you become nervous, right? Maybe you feel like a disagreement is an argument when it really is just a disagreement. You have a high level of emotional intensity, right? So you're always looking for a threat. Your spouse has become your enemy because your body is dysregulated. Somebody write that down. Your spouse has become your enemy because your body's dysregulated. And so you need to be paying attention. How are you approaching conflict? How are you approaching hardships in your relationships? Are you shying away from them? Are you freezing, or are you uber defensive? You want to fight every single body, everything. You feel like you need to have the last word in because you feel threatened and you feel like you need to have the last say. The other thing that we see is that you confuse emotional safety with agreement. So when the nervous system is dysregulated, disagreement feels like rejection. Oh my God. Some of us are struggling with high levels of rejection. That's why we're not married yet. Anytime someone disagrees, anytime someone doesn't see things your way, you be like, well, that's it. I'm leaving that. Or that they don't agree with me. I'm leaving that. Right. And so we see disagreement as rejection. And part of what needs to happen is you actually need to walk through your issues as to why you're afraid of being rejected, why you're afraid of being misunderstood, why you're afraid of people not always being on your side. Because if you don't deal with that, every time someone disagrees with you, you're going to feel like they're rejecting you. So you're going to want to reject them first, because that's what rejection does. I'm going to reject you first so that you don't reject me. And this leads to avoidance, people pleasing, or emotional withdrawal. So when you're married, what you feel like is emotional safety is he agrees with everything I say. We're both always on the same page. And you feel like if you're not in agreement, then he doesn't love you. He doesn't care about you, right? Whereas emotional safety is not agreement. And so you have to learn within marriage that we could disagree and we still be in love. We could have different opinions and we're still headed in the same direction. What you don't want to become is a people pleaser. So when people fear rejection, they say, you know what, I'm going to do whatever I need to do to keep them. And that's why we end up in these relationships that are dysfunctional, relationships that are toxic, because we're doing whatever we need to do to keep them. We're doing whatever we need to do so that they don't leave us, because we're so afraid of being rejected. We would rather have the dysfunction than the rejection. So you got to make sure that you're working through that. Another thing that we see is that when your the nervous system is dysregulated, you cannot be present long enough to be understood. What does that mean? Dysregulation shortens your window of tolerance. I talked about your window of tolerance a couple weeks ago, and in the free webinar that we did in January, we did that free webinar on how to build a successful life by regulating your nervous system. Your window of tolerance is how much you can handle of pressure and pain and stress and anxiety, right? And so when that window of tolerance starts to shrink, a lot of people begin to disassociate. They stop being present. They're not listening to their spouse anymore. And that's why it is important for you to know when you've hit rock bottom, when you're getting ready to hit that wall. We don't want you to hit rock bottom. We don't want you to get to the point where you're so burnt out that you're no longer present with your spouse or your future spouse, but you need to be paying attention. So what happens is people shut down mid conversation, or they become reactive before getting clarity. Oh, so what you're saying is this. No, that's not what I'm saying. Well, what do you mean when you said that, right? And you're not able to hear them out. You're not able to have a clear conversation. You're not able to really listen because you are jumpy. You are impulsive. You are just wanting to be done with whatever the pressure is in that moment. And so we see a lot of fights and a lot of arguments that are going on in relationships. And part of it could be, do I need to feel safe? Holy Spirit, do I need to feel aligned with you? And we shared some of these tips last week when we did our fast, as well as in previous teachings. So you have to be aware. If you've had a crazy, hectic day that was super stressful, your husband is not your enemy. Your spouse is not your enemy when you come home. But what happens a lot of times is you come home and we're reactive towards them because we're dysregulated from a crazy day. And this is going to happen whether you're married or not. And you have to be aware of how your body is responding to external stimuli so that you can have healthy relationships. Your body is guarded during physical intimacy. This is huge, and this is for the webinar next week. So if you haven't registered, it's actually one of my favorite lessons that I teach on his needs and her needs. His needs are primarily physical, and we're going to talk about the spiritual implication of a healthy sex life for men. And then her needs are primarily hormonal, and we're going to look at what hormones are what's happening when you're 20, what's happening in your 30s, what's happening in your 40s hormonally wise, and why that helps build a healthy sex life. But when your nervous system is dysregulated, what's going to happen is that you won't feel relaxed. I don't know how many wives and maybe husbands can say, I just don't feel relaxed. I don't feel like I can get to that point where I can be free, where I can experience that the marriage bed is what was that scripture that I love? It's unrestricted, right? Like you can't go for it because your body is all over the place. So sex requires safety, relaxation, and presence. If you don't feel safe, right? And this is the thing, singles, if you don't feel safe now because you went through a trauma, because you've dealt with micro traumas, you're not going to feel safe when you're married. The safety is not that you feel your spouse is unsafe. It's that your body just doesn't feel safe. If you were molested or abused when you were younger and never went through any care, your body just doesn't feel safe. And so you get into this marriage and you're like, this should be fun, but I don't feel safe. I don't feel like I can be myself. A guarded nervous system stays tense, and that can make sex very painful. It stays disconnected. So you're thinking about other things when you're supposed to be intimate with your spouse, or it numbs, right? And it makes intimacy feel like effort instead of enjoyment. Effort instead of enjoyment. If you are there and you're like, Lord have mercy, this has felt like more work. And this is so funny because I love the singles. The singles, during the snowstorm here, they were like, oh, if I was married, I would, glorify God the whole weekend. I'm just going to be having, sex all weekend, right? That's what that's what they were referring to. And I'm like, I want to talk to you 3 years into the marriage, because you can be. But if you haven't dealt with your stuff and you haven't dealt with your emotional needs, you get into that marriage and you realize it's not the movies. It's not what you thought it was like when you were single, right? There is bills, there is kids, there's all these other things, but we should be having the most sex. Married couples should be having more sex than single people. And so you've got to do the work of saying what is going on internally, right? That is making it difficult. And I'm going to give you guys the tips next week, and we're going to share all of that. We'll also share about our marriage retreat that's coming up in May, because then we really get into the nitty gritty of stuff. But during the webinar, we'll share some tips around how do you relax your body? How do you get to that place, right? So that you are enjoying it and the marriage bed is undefiled and you're having more enjoyment than the singles, right? And so it's really important that you manage your body, that you feel safe, you feel connected as well. I dropped the link for the webinar in the chat there because I'm sure that one hit home for several of you guys. So you can join us next week. Another thing that happens when our nervous system is not regulated is that we interpret neutral behavior as negative. So I'm talking to the singles and the married people. So before you are married, right? What happens is that when somebody, and even in marriage, you interpret somebody's tone, somebody's facial expressions, or even silence, right, as a threat. And not necessarily as a threat like they're going to hurt you, but as a threat as if they don't love me anymore or they don't want me anymore, right? Because internally we're feeling this, I got to do stuff on my own. I got to figure it out. I got to survive. And so he's not responding anymore. Maybe he's talking to Betsy again. Maybe he's gone back to that old relationship, and we begin to respond. Literally, you will feel your body, right? Your body will follow your emotions. And that's why this year I've really focused on not just teaching on your soul, which is your will, emotions, and intellect, and your spirit, but your body, because we are triune beings. And so your body follows your emotions, which on the other hand, let me go ahead and drop this little thing in here. We released our coaching certifications this week for those that want to become life coaches, those that want to learn how to walk people through inner healing and deliverance. And then we released a new certification, which I am so excited about. It's called the Trauma Informed Coach. Now, you don't have to be a coach to be trauma informed. So the whole 6 weeks is teaching you on how to understand trauma, is teaching you how trauma appears. It's not a certification so you can diagnose trauma or treat trauma, but it's so that you can be informed to walk alongside. Now, if you are a pastor, you need to be a trauma-informed pastor. If you are a spouse, you need to be a trauma-informed spouse. And so that certification is going to be for everybody. I'll talk about it another time, but that's something that we just released. So you need to understand the impact of trauma, the impact of work, the impact of stress, the impact of anxiety, because when you don't, you misread tone, you misread facial expressions, you misread all kinds of things, which fuels unnecessary conflicts. Have you ever been in a season with your spouse or whoever you're dating and you're like, we cannot stop fighting? Could it be that your body is so dysregulated that it doesn't know how to be at peace? It doesn't know how to ask the right questions instead of assuming, how to take a step back instead of having to always be correct, right? And so you want to make sure that you're working on that. We're almost done, and then I'm going to take your questions. You struggle to express needs without shame or anger. One of the things that dysregulation does is when we're overwhelmed, maybe we are overwhelmed with raising 3 little kids, and you're overwhelmed because you've gained all this weight, and you're overwhelmed because you're not able maybe to please your wife like you used to because you're tired now and you're stressed out at work. When you're overwhelmed, oftentimes you internalize that overwhelm. We say things like, maybe it's just me. Maybe I need to do something differently. And when we internalize things, we step into guilt and shame. Guilt and shame. And shame says something is wrong with you. Guilt says I did something wrong. I don't have time to teach on this, but it's in my book, Healing Your Past. We really explored guilt and shame. And so when you feel guilt and shame, this is when you don't want to get undressed in front of your spouse, right? Because you feel a little bit ashamed. Maybe you feel ashamed about your body. Maybe you feel ashamed about not being there, but you become extremely critical You can shut down. You can be frustrated easily. And then it's really hard for you to be vulnerable in communication. To have a great sex life, you have to be vulnerable. You have to be open. You have to let it all out there. But when there is guilt and there is shame, it is difficult. For those of you who are not married yet, right? You want to practice. What does it mean to be vulnerable with one or two safe people? What does it mean to really share what's going on? What are some of the things that I'm most ashamed of? Because if not, you're going to hold it in and it's going to impact your body as well as your overall emotional connection. And then two things. There's therapists that I absolutely love, the Gottmans, and they talk about repairing your marriage. And part of how you repair your marriage is in how you respond and how quickly you respond when something is broken or something is missing. And so when we talk about repairing conversations, this is when you are able to say, hey, we both were wrong, and I know I was a little bit off, and I am really sorry. And the other person is able to do the same thing. But dysregulation makes repair feel like emotionally expensive, like it's too much work. It feels like I'm just going to leave, the issues, let them keep going unresolved because I don't have the strength. And yes, if you're overwhelmed, if you're anxious, if you're tired, you will not want to do the work of repairing your marriage. And so you have to make sure that emotionally, spiritually, and physically, you're in a healthy place so that when there are those hard conversations that need to happen, you're not falling asleep, or you'd rather not deal with it because internally you don't feel like you can deal with it. The quicker you repair, the stronger your marriage is going to be. The marriages that struggle the most, that end up really not being able to be strong, have a difficult time repairing their marriage. All right. And then 9 and then 10. I said I'll give you 10, right? So you disconnect emotionally before you can disconnect physically. So emotional intimacy precedes physical intimacy. And this is huge for girls. We're going to learn this next week in the webinar, that for us, and I'll give this little freebie. Well, the webinar is free as well. But for us, we want to be emotionally connected. We want to look eye to eye. We want to make sure that he hears us and that we are loved. And then we can have wild sex. Whereas for men, they want to have wild sex and then they feel emotionally connected. They're like, this is my girl. I want to hear whatever she wants. We always joke that at that moment, you can send them to do anything and they will do it. And so women need to know that you don't always have to have that emotional connection, right? Before you have a physical connection, that it is actually going to help you if you can have that physical connection first, and then he will be more emotionally present. Now, all of that doesn't matter if you're not emotionally regulated. It doesn't matter if your emotions are all over the place, because when he's ready to emotionally communicate, you're going to be like, I don't know. I don't feel safe. And you're blaming that person. So we got to work on all of those things so that we can be able to be emotionally connected as well. And then the last one, your body doesn't feel safe receiving love. So for the singles, this is the time to evaluate, how do you respond when people hug you? How do you respond when people give you compliments? How do you respond when people tell you that you are great, or you are handsome, or you are beautiful? How do you respond? Because if you reject those types of things, then internally you don't feel like you deserve love. And when we don't feel like we deserve love, we reject it over and over. In marriage, past wounds, what they do, and even before you're married, is to train our nervous system to expect disappointment. And you could have had some disappointment in your marriage. Maybe you had a really tough first 3 years. Maybe there was adultery in the marriage. Maybe there was just financial abuse in the marriage. And so your body has been trained for disappointment based on what happened. And so you have to retrain your body by recreating a new way of thinking, by examining the new evidence. The person has changed, the person has been faithful, the person has been open about the money, the person has been consistent. We call this a corrective experience. If you're not married yet, you need to get around healthy people. It doesn't have to be romantic, where you're having healthy connections so that they can rewire your previous understanding of relationships. Even healthy affection can feel unfamiliar or unsafe in a healthy place, because you still have chaos in your body. You still have chaos in your brain. That's why people will keep going back to abusers. That's why people will say, I saw this little comment on my timeline. They were talking about what's his name? Is it Kyle? And she's dating the rapper Meg the Stallion, or whatever they call her. And the girl was like, I don't understand why she's dating him. He's just a handsome square. And everybody was trying to tell her this is, oh, and she's a baddie. I guess that's the term that you guys use out there, right? But the problem is these baddies keep dating bad guys and they keep getting hurt. And so somebody was like, but you've been shot at, you've been cheated on, you've been whatever. What she needs is a handsome square. But when our body is used to chaos, we keep going to people that create chaos. And so you have to retrain and rewire your body to think on these things that are pure, lovely, and good, so that we can be acceptance of what is normal. And so even in when it comes to intimacy, sexual intimacy, you may have had these experiences. Pornography will do a number on your nervous system, and it will do a number on your view of sex. And so you get into that marriage and you feel like it should be a movie or however they do this stuff, because your body is wired based on what you perceive, and you have to allow the Holy Spirit to help wire you. So I'll invite you once again to the His Needs, Her Needs webinar that is happening next week. If you want to become a trauma-informed person, whether you're going to coach, whether you just pastor, whether you lead people, whether you have a spouse that may have gone through it, our coaching certifications are open. If you want to become a life coach or go through the inner healing, we've changed the model. So once you register, you start learning right away. And then every month you have Q&A with me. So that link is also there for the coaching as well as the webinar. All right, I'm going to take some questions. I love these 2 weeks before Valentine's Day because it's fun. I don't always teach on relationships and marriage. I love them. But you know, we teach on so many great things that we don't always get a chance. Oh, and the last thing, join us at our marriage retreat. We have a couple spots left. This is where the men break up, the women break up in different groups. We all learn together. We have fun. It's workshops in the morning, and then we go into just enjoying marriage and being together. And so I'm going to drop that marriage link as well. Bless each other for Valentine's Day with this. Get around other married couples. Get around people that can coach you and train you, that have been married for a long time. People that went to school for these things like sex therapy and emotional wellness, so that you can also build your marriage. So that Eden 2026 is the marriage link. All right, let me go into here. If you have a question, put hashtag Q, singles and married folks. You can put your questions in there. Thank you, Marcy. Thank you so much. I hope this is helpful. We want the singles to be prepared, and we want the people that are married to be thriving. And it is possible to already be thriving and growing in those areas. Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Hashtag Q. Let me check Instagram and make sure if they have any questions there that they're asking them as well. You can put hashtag Q and I will answer your questions around healing your body, healing your spirit, healing your emotions, so that you can get married and so that you can build a thriving marriage. All of those things are interconnected, and you have to be aware of the things that are interconnected so that you can grow in maturity and you can grow in health. So good. Yes, Ginger. We should be having good sex. Yes, we should. Married folks, do all that you need to do to make sure that your spirit, your soul, and your body are in that place so that you can be thriving. Awesome. So I look forward to being on again. So normally I'm on Wednesdays. I needed a day off. And so that's why I'm on Thursday, but I'll be back on next week, Wednesday. And then next week, Thursday night is our free webinar. Here's a question. How can I tell if the guy is anxiously attached or just hurt because I broke up too soon? So if you broke up with them at that point, then it really doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. But if they are saying, so this is the thing, always remember why you break up with people. What were the reasons that you broke up with that person, and have those things changed? If those things haven't changed, then you just need to have strong boundaries and you need to move forward. Now, some people do break up with other people too soon because they're sabotaging their own relationships. They look for reasons to break up with people soon. And you know that that's a cycle because it has happened relationship after relationship. If that's what you're doing, then you need to do some of that inner work to figure out, why am I constantly ending these relationships really soon? If the relationship is unto righteousness, meaning it makes you more like Jesus, it's maturing you, it's growing you up. If it brings peace, right, and it brings you joy, then it is something that lines up with something that you should be part of. But if it's pulling you away from the Lord, you guys are drinking, sexing, cursing, all the things, right? It doesn't walk with the Lord. If it doesn't bring any peace, you're fighting all the time. There's joy sometimes and joy not many times. There's no point in trying to figure out, is this something that I ended too soon? So you can judge a godly relationship by asking, is it unto righteousness? Are the fruit of the Spirit there? Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, self-control. Is it full of joy? And is it peaceful? That doesn't mean this is all of the time, but 80% of the time, these things are there. Then I know that this is a God relationship and I'm headed in the right direction. All right. Oh, yeah. So someone said, Lord, help the men with the prostate issue. So there is so much that they can do. First of all, there is so much you can do sexually, right? And intimately, outside of just intercourse, right? But that's for the marriage retreat. I may touch on it a little bit at the webinar, but there is things that can still help couples remain intimately connected without intercourse. So let me just say that, all right? Because sometimes people will get sick and sometimes people will have a hard season. And so you've got to figure out a way to still be intimately connected. And you as a couple have to talk about what that looks like. But it's really hard for couples to talk about those things if they've never been vulnerable about sex. And so that's the stuff that we train you guys in during our marriage retreat, as well as we'll talk a little bit about next week. I've been trying to leave my husband, oh Lord, for 13 years. I feel like God makes me stay. Why does he make me stay? God doesn't make you do anything. Marriage is free will. It is a choice. The same way God did not make you marry someone, he's also not going to make you stay. Now, with that said, if the person, right, if he's cheated, you actually have legal ground to leave. But I know a lot of people who have gone through adultery and have worked through the abuse and the affairs, and they are stronger. So both people will need to want to repair the marriage. It is possible to have gone through adultery and still be together and your marriage be stronger. So it is not always a reason to leave. Now, if it's multiple times over and over, that's up to you. But you guys get to choose. You get the reason the Lord allows us to choose our mate is because we have to choose them every day. God wouldn't, he did it one time, Adam and Eve. And guess what? Adam was blaming God for this wife that you gave me. Now God, all he does is give us parameters. But marry someone that you're equally yoked with. What does that mean? We can raise the dead, cleanse the leper together, right? And that's what that means. And then other than that, you get to choose. Right. And so sometimes in our choosing, we don't necessarily choose what God would have chosen for us, which he won't, but he'll give you a platter. He'll give you options. So what I would say is that if you are staying and you are hurt and there's still abuse, there's still neglect there, you need to go see a counselor. You need to talk to your pastor and figure out what the core issue is, which is usually self-worth issues that is keeping you there. All right. I live in a house with somebody that doesn't want to be with me no more. My husband, I'm really sorry. That can be very hard. And that's what happens when two married people become strangers, right? And so the thing is, God will never impose his will on someone else's will. And so the person would want to work on it in order for it to work. If they have made a decision that they don't want to work, they don't want to be married anymore, we can pray that the Holy Spirit helps them see, and that the Holy Spirit renews their passion and their love, but we cannot manipulate their will and make them stay or make them love you or make them this. So then the decision is up to you, right? Is this something, because that kind of situation will dysregulate your nervous system for a very long time, right? And so you've got to decide, how do I want to move forward? Marriage is powerful. Marriage is a covenant. When I was a single and I was young and I didn't fully understand marriage, I did not understand why people stay in marriage the way that they do. But it is powerful, and it was wired for us to stay. It is wired for us to fight. It is wired for us to not give up. That's why the Lord said he never authorized divorce. It was in the hands and it was in the hearts of the Israelites that they wanted to be like the pagan nations. And that's when he said, do whatever you want to do. So when God formed marriage, he formed it so that it is very painful to leave and to break. And that works out well when we can get over those hard seasons, when we both can say, okay, we're going to keep fighting and we're going to keep working on this. And then there's some where people just give up. And because early on, they did not have the emotional regulation, teaching, understanding on how to have the capacity to build a healthy marriage, it crumbles when they're married. That's why singles do the work. We have a bunch of teachings on Ask Dr. Faith. Oh, it's destinytrainingacademy.org on marriage prep. I have a marriage book. I have a marriage workbook. Take all of those things, study them, do all that you can so that your soul is fortified to be able to build a healthy marriage. I want to be married. I've met wolves in the church, discern and cut ties. Any advice? I'm 52, building, walking in purpose. So this is the thing. Sometimes when we're very spiritual, it can be to our detriment. All right. And so this is what I would say. The way you're going to discern is not by a spiritual hint. You're going to discern by fruit, right? And you may have already done this. So this is just to get advice to everybody. Don't just be like, oh, I sense that he's a player. No. Where are the girls that he's talking to? Like, look for evidence, right? Oh, I sense he's this. No, show me the evidence. If the evidence is there, run. But sometimes we're so used to disappointment that we lead with disappointment. We think everyone's going to disappoint us. We already assume it's not going to work out. And so you want to look for fruit. If the person has been showing up, if the person has been honest, if they told you about their past and they tell you how they're changing and how they're working forward, if they tell you that they're now more committed than they were before, that's not a wolf. That's somebody who's improving. That is somebody that's growing. And so you want to look for honesty and you want to look for transparency. Obviously, if those things are not there, then you got to run. All right. You got to fruit check. Fortified souls. What does that mean? That is one of my terms that I have coined. When a city is fortified, that means it is strong. It is a wall. And so when you are fortified, your will, your emotions, and intellect are mature. They're strong. They're aligned with who God is, so that things don't just blow you off course. Hardships don't just throw you, to depression for 6 months. You have a strong sense of resilience. You have a strong sense of self. That is how I defined a fortified soul. All right. Let me see if there's any other questions that I may be missing. How do marital affairs hurt the nervous system and connection between a married couple? That's a great question. So one, you are on edge, right? Because you have to rebuild trust. And because you're on edge, you're wondering, are they being faithful? And if you're wondering if they're being faithful, that adrenaline, all the things are always on that flight mode. Are they going to hurt me again? Is he doing it again? So this is let me check the phone. Let me double check. Let me talk to them again. You're constantly in that fight mode. And so in order to come out of that, you have to say, you know what? I cannot control his behavior or her behavior, because women cheat too. I have decided to stay. That means I've decided to trust him or her, and I've decided to trust God. Then you go to them and say, in order for me to be at peace, for me to be regulated, these are the things that are going to help me. And if they love you, right, and they say they want to work on it, maybe I need the passwords to your phone. I need location to where you're going. and I need XYZ. Different couples need different things. So you have to force yourself back into that place of rest, into that place of trust. And spouses who've cheated can help their spouse enter that place of regulation again by meeting them where they are. Now, you're not asking for crazy things. You're not, but at this point, if someone is trying to earn back trust, they should be willing to do whatever they need to do in order to earn back the trust. But yeah, I mean, betrayal is heartbreak, right? And so if the person is not being vulnerable and transparent about what they're doing, you're constantly wondering, and that's going to put you in that fight or flight mode. And if it's been happening for a really long time, you just freeze. You're like, it is what it is. And maybe you don't want to, you can't leave because kids, and you can't leave because you have businesses together. There's so many reasons, but your body does get stuck in that place. All right. Let me see if there's any more questions on Instagram, and then I will let you go. Make sure that you sign up for the free webinar next week, as well as our marriage retreat that is happening in May at at a resort in Arizona. I'm really excited about going. It's going to be beautiful. And I look forward to talking with you guys next Wednesday as we continue our conversation on love and marriage. Love and marriage. If this was helpful, share it with somebody else. And I look forward to talking to you soon. Bye-bye.